Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible Teaching Snippet of the day. Well, today I want to pick up on our series where we're talking about unclean spirits, and I have a couple of questions I want to answer. But before I do, I want to just talk about yesterday's snippet just a little bit. I stopped teaching on unclean spirits, and I actually talked about why I thought that we should, as believers, read the book of Enoch. And my number one reason is that Jesus read it and referred to it and made quotes from it in the Gospels. And if Jesus read it, we should read it, okay? That's my number one reason. Now, another reason is because it will bring clarity and answer a lot of questions for us that we simply cannot connect and understand in our 66 book. I call it our Slim Fast Bibles, where someone who's never been told by God or given authority by God to reduce and pull out certain books of the Bible that was in our sacred scriptures until 500 years ago. Some Bibles went down from about 81 books down to 73, and then of course now this is where I want to correct something I said yesterday. Yesterday I made the misstatement and said 1969, and I meant to say 1769. In 1769, our King James Bibles went down to 66 books, and it was the Benjamin Blaney version of it when it was published and put out. That's when it went down from the 81 books. I believe that's what I said. It had 81 in it. I've got it written in the front of my Bible. Yes, it's the 1611 King James Version had 81, and in 1769 it was reduced to 66. And you know what? If we've had all these writings around for all these years, I don't think any specific group of human beings have a right to tell us that we should not read them. But you know what? If you're in a denomination and you're satisfied with not reading them, then you don't have to. I just like to understand and know more. And one of the things that made me really want to read the book of Enoch again, and I read it several years back, but I started understanding that there are unclean spirits in the world today, okay? And it stops people from getting healed. Then I noticed that they were there when Jesus was walking the earth, and he dealt with them all the time. And so did the disciples, and in the Acts, the book of Acts, of the apostles. So obviously, devils and unclean spirits or evil spirits was around with Jesus and even with the New Testament believers. Now, with that all said, okay, I needed to understand why there were unclean spirits, where they came from, and we do not have to be confused by forgetful religion that says, well, we don't know. We don't know where the giants come from. We don't understand Genesis 6. Maybe it's children of Seth mating with Cain, his family. No, none of that. It is already established in scriptures that we don't have anymore where unclean spirits came from and why they're here. And it even said, and I quoted this yesterday, and I want to say this one more time because this was so profound when I read this. And it says, and the spirits of the giants, okay, the unembodied half-breed, fallen angels, human women, the spirits of the giants. Watch, this is what they do. They afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. That right there explains a lot of stuff to me. So, but anyway, what I want to talk about today, though, is I was asked a question, why do the other books in the New Testament, they don't talk about casting out unclean spirits? Only Jesus gives us that, okay, and it's not repeated as like something that the writers of the New Testament taught. And I'd like to go ahead and address that. Let me say this. Now, the word 1140, which means devils or unclean spirits, sorry, my iPad fell, devils or unclean spirits, that actually is in our New Testament 60 times. And it does appear in Matthew, Mark, Luke. that word appears in 2 Corinthians, 2 times in 1 Corinthians, in 1 Timothy, and in James, and in 3 times in Revelation. So there are references to it, okay? And here's what I want to explain. The letters that were written by the New Testament writers were really answering questions that new believers had. Like with Paul in his letter to the Corinthians, he was correcting behavior issues within the church and what they're doing. So just because the New Testament writers don't mention delivering people from unclean spirits over and over and over again does not mean it was not going on at the time, okay? Now, what I want to talk about more than that is what is so interesting to me is how in different denominations or groups of believers or Christians, if you want to call it that, one end of the spectrum will say that Christians cannot get unclean spirits, okay? But watch the far side of this. The other people who claim that they're Christians and believers tell us not to deliver unsaved people from unclean spirits or demons. So let me ask you something. Why would Jesus even talk about that New Testament believers, this is in Mark chapter 16, verse 15 through 18, Jesus said that believers, okay, future believers, would cast out or expel unclean spirits. So if Christians don't have them, so we don't need to cast them out of Christians, but then we're told not to cast out devils or unclean spirits off of non-believers, then that makes what Jesus told us to do a moot point, because Christians don't need deliverance, and we can't deliver non-believers. So which is it? And I just wanted to show you just how twisted and weird religion can get when we just get legalistic and want to, because here's what I see when I read the Bible. Jesus said that all future believers should cast out devils or unclean spirits. He said for us to lay hands on the sick. He did not qualify a handful, select few believers to do certain things and say, okay, so a handful of y'all need to do this, but the rest of y'all, you just go to church and don't worry about it. And then he doesn't say, and by the way, you handful of people that I have selected, these are the people that you should set free of unclean spirits or lay hands on, and the rest of the people you leave them hanging out there to suffer, because I really don't love all people. I pick and choose who I like and who I choose to work through, and I pick who I want to save, and then I pick who I want to leave them in torment. Boy, we can sure get twisted, can't we? Did you know Jesus loved the world, not just a handful of people? He loved the world so much that he was willing to be sent here by the Father who loved the world so much not to leave us abandoned. And Jesus loved all of us human beings, mankind, enough to get beaten on a Roman whipping post, to be hung on a cross, to be crucified, and to be buried, and for him to rise again to give us human beings power to go out and show the world that the kingdom of God and Jesus has come, and that we can set people free. My job is not to determine who can be set free by unclean spirits, who qualifies, I should say, to be set free, who qualifies to be have hands laid on to be healed. That is not my job. My job is to obey what Jesus asked me to do, and he did not tell me to select certain people. So with that said, I want to answer a question that was asked. Should we deliver unbelievers from unclean spirits? And the answer to that is yes. Can Christians have unclean spirits? Absolutely. I know that to be an absolute fact. Unclean spirits and devils are trespassers, and they don't care whose house, by the way, whose temple they break into and steal, kill, and destroy in. All they want is to hurt humankind, and that's their only goal, okay, is to hurt us, to keep us away from walking in power and knowing Jesus and spreading the kingdom of God. And if he cannot keep us from becoming believers and saved, then he will take the second option and just destroy our lives like he does unbelievers. Okay, so I want to leave you with a couple of scriptures, and I just want to read these to you. Now, this is in Luke 4:33, and this is talking about when Jesus went into the synagogue. Now, I want to read this to you very slow so you get it. Which had a spirit of an unclean devil. This man had a spirit on him, and it was an unclean devil. Now I'm going to flip over and read out of 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, and show you how this matches up. Now the Spirit of God speaketh expressly in the latter times. Some shall depart from the faith. Did you know that you can't depart from something that you weren't a part of? That's just something to think about. Okay, so some believers will depart from the faith. And here's what I want to connect. Giving heed to seducing spirits, that's that same word that's used over in Luke that Jesus was talking about right here in the synagogue that he was dealing with. Giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Those two scriptures mirror each other. And before I let you go, I want to read you, this is a little jewel I want to share with you. This is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, and this is in the Living Bible. This is so good. Here we go. For we are not fighting against people made of flesh and blood, but against persons without bodies, the evil rulers of the unseen world, those mighty satanic beings and great evil princesses of darkness who rule this world, and against huge numbers of wicked spirits in the spirit world. That right there, my friends, I probably am going to just post that with this teaching snippet. So yes, there are unclean spirits. Paul just sat there and told us that in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, okay? So anyway, God bless you, and tomorrow I'm going to hop back in and answer a couple more questions. I'll see you right here. Bye-bye.